For 3,000 years, the Galactic Empire had maintained absolute dominion over known space. 3,000 years of conquest. 3,000 years of unquestioned supremacy. The Valorian fleet alone, possessed enough firepower to level 100 worlds. Each battleship was a mobile fortress, bristling with plasma cannons and graviton-based weapons systems. The flagship, the Eternal Dominion, stretched across 1,000 kilometers of space. It had never known defeat, never even come close. The triumvirate council of the Empire watched the star charts with the casual confidence of immortals surveying their domain. They had conquered the Asheran Confederacy. They had brought the insectoid hives to heel. They had bent entire civilizations to their will through might and will alone. But in the year 2847 of the galactic calendar, something changed. A signal arrived from the outer rim of their empire. A message broadcast across all frequencies, in a language they did not immediately recognize. It came from a small blue world, circling a yellow star, in a region of space so remote that the Empire barely bothered to catalog it. The message was simple, direct, and it shook the foundations of everything they believed about their own invincibility. Earth to the Galactic Empire. We know you're there. We know what you want, and we're asking you politely one time to turn your ships around and leave our space. We won't ask again. The Triumvirate Council went silent. Emperor Varthus leaned forward on his throne, his 4 arms tense with barely contained rage. In 10,000 years of his family's rule, no world had ever dared to demand anything of the Empire. No species had ever issued an ultimatum. Destroy them, he said simply. And so the Valorian fleet set course for Earth, not with reluctance, not with caution, but with the absolute certainty that they were about to crush an ant beneath their boot. The flagship Eternal Dominion emerged from its jump point first, cutting through the void like a knife. Admiral Kairos stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, his 3 eyes fixed on the tactical display. His species, the Varl, had evolved as conquerors. Every instinct in his body screamed dominance. Every cell in his frame had been engineered for combat. "Scan the planet," he commanded. His tactical officer, a young Centis female named Threx, worked her console. Her expression, always difficult for other species to read, shifted into something almost like confusion. "Admiral," she said quietly, "there's almost nothing there. Minimal orbital defenses. A few satellites. Some kind of early warning system, but it's primitive. Very primitive." Admiral Kairos made a sound that was something between a laugh and a growl. "They threaten the might of the Empire with primitives? Prepare the orbital bombardment cannons. We'll give them one opportunity to witness the majesty of Imperial power." He opened a channel to Earth. The image that appeared on screens across the planet was designed to inspire terror. The Eternal Dominion, impossibly vast, hanging above them like a moon made of death. Weapons charging. Shields brilliant with barely contained energy. Admiral Kairos spoke, his voice deep and resonant, filtered through translation software that somehow made it sound even more menacing. "People of Earth, you have made a grave error. The Galactic Empire does not negotiate with primitives. You will now witness the full extent of our power. You have 10 minutes to contemplate your extinction." On Earth, in command centers and government buildings, humans watched the same image. Fear was everywhere. Rational fear. The kind that came from understanding you were facing something monumentally larger than yourself. But in one particular facility, deep beneath the surface of a mountain in what had once been called Colorado, a different kind of determination crystallized. Dr. Sarah Chen, the lead architect of humanity's greatest secret, looked at the screen with an expression of grim resolve. Around her, dozens of scientists and military personnel watched in horrified silence. One woman, Commander James Mitchell, stood beside. 8 minutes, Sarah replied. Her voice was steady. Steady in the way that soldiers sound when they've already accepted they might not walk away from what comes next. Full power to the uplinks. It's time. Are you sure? Mitchell's jaw was clenched. Once we activate it, there's no going back. We've never tested it at full scale. We don't even know. I know. Sarah interrupted. She looked at him, and in her eyes was the clarity of someone who had run the numbers 1,000 times. The story of how humans created what came to be known as the Synchronous Cascade Defense Network begins years earlier. When first contact had come, not the Valorian fleet, but explorers decades before, humanity had learned the terrifying truth. The galaxy was full of species that made humanity look like children playing with sticks and stones. The Asheran alone possessed technology that would make human fusion bombs look like firecrackers. And yet, humanity had something else. It started as a theory. A physicist at MIT, a woman named Dr. Victoria Reeves, had been studying the quantum entanglement properties of human neural networks. Not AI, not artificial intelligence in the way other species created it, but something biological, something that emerged from the specific way human brains processed information, made intuitive leaps, connected disparate ideas. She had theorized that if you could link human minds in perfect synchronization through a quantum-entangled interface, you could create something that no biological species had ever achieved before. A true collective intelligence that maintained individual consciousness. A hive mind that wasn't servile. A network that grew stronger the more minds it connected. The implications were staggering. Over 20 years, in secret, the nations of Earth had developed the system. 2,000 volunteers had undergone the procedure. 2,000 humans, scattered across the globe, linked through quantum pathways at the subatomic level. They maintained their individual identities, their individual lives, but they could share thoughts in microseconds, could process information across thousands of perspectives simultaneously, could think in ways that even the most advanced AI couldn't quite match. The synchronized network didn't think like a computer. It thought like humanity but amplified 1,000 times, could see patterns in chaos. It could make intuitive leaps that algorithms couldn't. And at that moment, with the Valorian fleet descending toward Earth, it was the only advantage humanity had. Sarah Chen's hands moved across the controls. The quantum uplinks hummed to life, connecting across the globe through fiber optic cables buried beneath mountains and oceans. In her mind, in the minds of nearly 2,000 volunteers from every nation and culture on Earth, a sudden and profound shift occurred. They didn't lose themselves. They remained human, but they became something more. From thousands of perspectives, they began to see the problem simultaneously. The Valorian fleet's weapon systems operated on principles of Valorian physics, elegant, predictable, militaristic. Designed for dominance over species that operated on single unified commands, like all other biological species in the galaxy. They had never encountered anything like what the synchronized network represented. A technician in Tokyo saw it one way. A mathematician in Sao Paulo understood it in another. A military strategist in London connected those insights. A programmer in Lagos found the bridge between them. A physicist in Sydney saw the applications. A logistician in Mumbai understood the mechanics. Across the network, understanding crystallized. Fire. The cannons of the flagship blazed with power that would make stars jealous. And stopped. Not metaphorically, literally stopped. Just beyond Earth's upper atmosphere, the particles of energy simply ceased to exist. Decoherent, dispersed, impossible. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, alarms screamed. Admiral! Threx's voice cracked with something that might have been fear. The weapons fired, but the energy signature, it's not being absorbed. It's being redirected somehow. Quantum-level dissipation. I've never seen anything like it. Admiral Kairos leaned forward. For the first time in 3,000 years of Valorian dominance, he felt something he'd never felt before. Uncertainty. Try again, he commanded. Full salvo. All ships. Now. And every single ounce of energy was caught, analyzed, understood, and quietly dispersed by something the synchronized network had created in the precious moments since Admiral Kairos had first hailed the planet. It wasn't a shield. Shields required resistance, required energy to maintain. This was something else entirely. A quantum-level understanding of the projectiles themselves, allowing them to be decoherent at the moment of impact. A manipulation of probability itself, applied not through brute force, but through the kind of precise, elegant understanding that only a mind thinking across thousands of perspectives could achieve. The Valorian fleet had thrown their entire arsenal at a planet. The planet had not blocked it, dissolved it, as if the weapons had never existed at all. Admiral Kairos stared at the tactical display. Around him, his officers moved in shocked silence. The Eternal Dominion had never experienced failure. The Valorian Empire had never encountered a military force that could match them. Species did not simply stand against the Valorian fleet. They surrendered. They capitulated. They begged for mercy. But they did not nullify an entire assault without firing a single weapon in return. "Hail the planet," Kairos said, his voice dropping to something almost reverent. "Open all channels." The image of Earth appeared on the screen. Blue, beautiful, fragile looking, but something had changed in how he perceived it. What he had seen as weakness moments before now registered as something entirely different. A voice came through the communication system, a human voice, calm and measured, but with something underneath it, something that sounded almost like regret. "This is Dr. Sarah Chen, speaking on behalf of Earth and the government of humanity. Admiral, I need you to understand something. We don't want to fight you. We've never wanted conflict with anyone. We're young. We're still learning what it means to exist in your galaxy." There was a pause. Sarah continued, "But we also won't let our world burn. If you force us to, we'll defend ourselves. We'll defend our children, our homes, everything we love. And yes, apparently we can do that in ways you didn't expect. But that's not what I want. That's not what humanity wants." Admiral Kairos felt something in his chest, an emotion that had no name in Valorian, a feeling that came from being faced with something that shattered your understanding of the cosmos. "What is it that you want, then?" he asked. "Primitives do not simply threaten empires and walk away." There was another pause, and when Sarah spoke again, her voice carried something that cut through the static between worlds. "We want what every species wants. We want to be left alone to grow, to learn, to find our place in the galaxy alongside everyone else. We want to prove that we belong here, not through conquest, but through the simple fact that we exist and we're not going away. We want to be neighbors, not subjects. We want to show you that strength isn't just weapons and fleets. Strength is also compassion, cooperation, the willingness to find a way forward that doesn't end in destruction." On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, something shifted in the Varl Admiral's three eyes. "You could have destroyed us," he said slowly. "Your defense system, it could have used that same force against us, against our ships. You could have retaliated." "We know," Sarah replied. "But that's not who we are, Admiral. That's not what we want the galaxy to know about humanity." In the hours that followed, something unprecedented occurred. Admiral Kairos initiated direct negotiations with Earth, not as the representative of a conquered world begging for mercy, but as one military commander speaking to another power that had earned his respect through restraint rather than aggression. The Valorian fleet did not attack. It did not leave either. Instead, it positioned itself at neutral distance while the Admiral and Dr. Chen engaged in a dialogue that would eventually reshape the political landscape of the entire known galaxy. The Triumvirate Council watched in horror as their greatest military asset engaged in what looked suspiciously like diplomatic talks with a species they had marked for extinction. But something had changed in Admiral Kairos. He had encountered something he'd been taught his entire life didn't exist. A species that possessed overwhelming power and chose not to use it for conquest. A species that had the means to destroy his fleet and instead chose to talk. In their conversation, transmitted across the void between worlds, something profound emerged. Sarah Chen explained to Admiral Kairos what the Synchronized Network was, how humanity had developed it not as a weapon of war, but as a way to bridge the gaps in human understanding, how it represented the best of what humans could achieve when they worked together, not in servitude, not under compulsion, but through voluntary cooperation and mutual respect. "Every mind in our network," Sarah said, "is there by choice. We could have forced people to join. We could have created soldiers without free will like so many species before us. But we didn't. Because we still believe, that the most powerful force in the universe isn't obedient. Admiral Kairos listened, and as he listened, he began to understand something that had eluded 3,000 years of Valorian civilization. Power without purpose is tyranny. Strength without restraint is cruelty. And the greatest strength of all is the ability to choose mercy. By the time negotiations concluded, the Valorian fleet had received new orders directly from the Triumvirate Council. Orders that would have seemed impossible hours before. Earth was to be recognized as a sovereign world. More than that, humanity was to be granted full status in the Galactic Council. Not as a conquered species, not as subjects, but as equals. We're young, we make mistakes, we fight amongst ourselves. We're not perfect, but we believe that the best version of ourselves comes from lifting each other up, from sharing knowledge freely, from understanding that our strength isn't in our ability to dominate, but in our ability to cooperate. Emperor Varthus, the Varl who had ordered Earth's destruction, listened in silence. And when Sarah finished speaking, he did something that shocked every advisor in the chamber. He stood. It was a gesture of respect, a signal that in Valorian culture meant, "You are worthy of my full attention and honor." One by one, the other council members stood as well. In that moment, the entire political structure of known space shifted on its axis. Humanity had not conquered their way to prominence. They had earned it through the simplest and most powerful act in the universe. They had chosen to be better than what they had the power to be. Years later, when scholars studied what became known as the first contact paradigm, they would trace the moment that everything changed to that single decision made beneath a mountain on Earth. Instead, they chose something harder. They chose to defend without destroying. They chose to stand firm while leaving the door open for peace. They chose to show the galaxy that true strength wasn't the absence of mercy. It was the presence of the wisdom to know when to exercise it. And from that single choice, everything changed. Within a generation, the galaxy had transformed. The old way, dominance through military might, began to give way to something new. Not overnight, not without struggle, but inexorably. Because once you see that another path is possible, you can never quite ignore it again. The Valorian Empire would eventually transform into what became known as the Galactic Federation, a true cooperative alliance of equals, rather than a hierarchy of dominance. It wasn't perfect. No political system is, but it was built on a foundation that was fundamentally different from what came before. And at the center of that transformation was humanity. Not because humans were the strongest, not because they had the most advanced technology, but because at a moment when they held all the cards, they had chosen to play them with mercy. It would take hundreds of years for humans to fully understand their place in the galaxy. But from that first moment, standing against the Valorian fleet with nothing but their courage and their choice to be better than what they had the power to be, they had planted a seed. A seed of something the galaxy had forgotten it needed. Hope. The hope that a young species, emerging from their home world, could stand shoulder to shoulder with ancient powers and be recognized not as subjects, but as equals. The hope that strength and compassion could coexist. The hope that the best version of yourself didn't come from dominating others, but from lifting them up and choosing to be lifted by them in return. And so, when the historians of 1,000 worlds came to write about the moment when humanity truly arrived on the galactic stage, they did not write about wars won or fleets destroyed. They wrote about two people, an admiral of an ancient empire and a scientist from a young world, separated by space and species and everything that should have kept them enemies. They wrote about the moment Admiral Kairos realized that he had encountered something he'd never been taught to value, a species that had power and chose wisdom over wielding it. They wrote about how one choice, made by a group of people who believed in each other enough to link their minds together, not in servitude but in voluntary cooperation, had changed the trajectory of galactic civilization. For the first time, the galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human. It meant to stand for something. It meant to defend what you love with everything you have. And it meant, most importantly, to know when to extend your hand in peace instead of closing it into a fist. It meant to be young enough to believe the galaxy could be different, and strong enough to fight for it, while wise enough to know that some battles are won not by destroying your enemy, but by showing them a better way to exist alongside you. The synchronized network of Earth never fired a weapon. They never needed to, because they had learned the most powerful truth in the universe. That true strength is not the power to destroy. It is the power to choose not to. If the story moved you, if it reminded you of what makes us human, what we're capable of when we truly stand together, subscribe for more human stories from the stars. Because the galaxy is vast and full of wonders, but none of them are quite as extraordinary as us.